We are a little over 28 hours removed from the Indianapolis Colts loss to the Green Bay Packers, and I've been saying it before. I'll continue to saying it. There's a lot of people automatically calling for this to be time for Anthony Richardson to be done. The experiment is over, and all of this, which obviously, like, I think if you've watched the Colts, there's no way that you actually believe that. If you're a fan of this football team, there's no way that you believe that this experiment is anywhere close to over, or even that there's any reason to be throwing in the towel, specifically on this offensive side of the football. Defensively, it's a whole other story. Defensively, the Colts look rough. But I want to show some prime examples of what we are looking at when we're looking at Anthony Richardson, because the numbers go so far beyond the initial cause for panic, especially after yesterday's game, of which did not particularly. There were some mistakes for sure, offense and defense, and obviously the Packers, who were beaten up and didn't have their starting quarterback, obviously did not. They didn't have a lot of points, by any means, but they also didn't allow a lot of points. And so the Indianapolis Colts, this stat came up today from 33rd Team. That said the Indianapolis Colts are the only team in football to score at least 5 touchdowns while still not getting a win. And that goes to show a lot on the defense, but it also goes to show situational football. One thing that was talked about today with the Kansas City Chiefs is that they capitalize on mistakes. So it looks like the NFL is rigged against the Chiefs, when in reality, they just know how to capitalize on mistakes. And that's something that they've learned from experience. This isn't something that just comes naturally. Again, we're talking about Gus Bradley is the most not elderly, advanced, I guess, defensive or coach on this staff. Shane Steichen is only in his second year as a head coach. You've got Jim Bob Cooter, who's only in his second year with the Colts as a offensive coordinator, and so many others that are first time. Reggie Wayne was playing in the NFL like less than 10 years ago. And so there's so many guys on this team that are still trying to figure this out, and it doesn't get built in a day. All of these things don't happen in a day. Even we talk about one of the best coaches, the best coaches in the league, Sean McVay. He didn't have success right off the bat. And so I think that we're looking at this and trying to figure out automatically, well, let's right the ship, as if there's not so many other teams that are really, really good football teams, that are Super Bowl contending football teams that are also 0-2. The Cincinnati Bengals are 0-2. The Baltimore Ravens are 0-2, and so many others like it. But let's dive into the numbers here as to why, as Anthony Richardson through week 2. Because there's a lot to be said, and there's obviously so much more than the box score will ever tell you. But one thing that is incredibly interesting is Anthony Richardson is evolving already. His time to throw led the NFL. He had more time to throw and less abandoned plays. His percentage of abandoned plays, which is essentially saying there's nothing there, I'm going to scramble, was up in the 41%. Through the first 5 starts in football, and yesterday it was down to, I believe the number was 18% abandon rate. He only had a couple of scrambles where he abandoned, but let's look at the box score between the Packers and the Colts, because total offensive plays, obviously the Packers led that, and then average EPA per play. The Colts were negative 0.061, and Packers were 0.007 in the positive. Total net yards, 331, 354 to the Packers. Average yard per play, the Colts actually had that one at 6.3. Total first downs, the Colts tied the Packers. Rushing first downs, the Packers had 12, the Colts had 6. Passing first downs, the Colts had 12, and the Packers had 7. And then the Colts had a penalty first down. So you look at those side by side, and it's actually a well more comparable game than what the game was showing us. I mean, they allowed 234 yards in the first half of just rushing offense. And obviously this defense is beaten up. Nick Cross leads NFL right now with 29 tackles, and he leads the rest of the league by 10, and he's a safety. And that's not where you want to be. That's great for Nick Cross, but we should not be relying on a safety to be our leading tackler, and this linebacker room's got to step up. But one thing that we're looking at here is there's so much more analytics to this, into what Anthony Richardson's doing. For the second week in a row, he had a 41.7 pass success rate, which isn't great, but his 11 yards to scramble on fourth down was his highest value play. His 2 interceptions obviously weren't good, but they impacted his EPA a lot. And he talks about those 2 interceptions. One of them he sailed. He'll be the first to admit he sailed that one. And the second one, he read what was basically a double slant where Pittman goes 8 yards and Adonai Mitchell goes 5 yards, and whatever one the linebacker goes to. And if you watch the play, Wilson, the linebacker, makes an incredible move forward as if he's going to cover Adonai Mitchell and then just backs up. And that's just experience. We know that with Anthony Richardson. But 5.1 completion percentage, obviously, for this week, and he continues to throw the ball far. And that's something that we know with Anthony Richardson is the accuracy isn't great, but the arm strength is there, and the reliability is there. This is still the youngest quarterback in football by quite a bit, especially as far as starting goes. But then this is an interesting. I'll throw this graph on screen that I'm looking at here, and this comes to us from the Stampede Blue. But Pierce continues to be Anthony Richardson's go-to guy, but the ball was spread out a lot more this week, going to Pittman, Taylor, Adonai Mitchell, Granson. But you look at the success rate. This is, I think, very, very interesting, where the average yards per play right here, and then yards after catch. So Taylor obviously is going to rely a lot on yards after catch, but then Alec Pierce does a great job, or Anthony Richardson rather does a great job of getting it to him without the need for yards after catch. And this is, I just think there's so much more here. But I want to throw up 2 specific numbers before we end this video of the understanding of where Anthony Richardson is and why I don't think it's time to panic. I mean, the greatest quarterback in Colts history, one of the top 5 quarterbacks of all time, Peyton Manning, led the league in interceptions and was one of the worst accurate passers in football in his first season, and then obviously was able to turn it around. This is the 6th NFL start for Anthony Richardson. But this is I want to read these first 6 games of this NFL quarterback, and then I'm going to read the first 6 games of Anthony Richardson. Actually, I'm going to mix it up, whichever one. And I'm just going to read off of completion percentage and touchdown interception. So first game was 3 for 5 with a 60% completion percentage, came in. Second game, 50% completion percentage. Third game, 52% completion percentage. Fourth game, 43.6% completion percentage. Turned it around a little bit with a 79% completion percentage for 231 yards. And then a 60% completion percentage there in the next week, and almost had equal touchdown to interception ratio. And now I'm going to read another quarterback, and this is 50% completion percentage, 47% completion percentage, a 75% completion percentage, 44, so had a low week, 60, 64, for a grand total of 59.5 in his first 2. So the first one was NFL quarterback Josh Allen, and the second one was Anthony Richardson. This stuff takes time. When you're talking about guys like C.J. Stroud, they are in Ohio State is playing in a basically NFL division, right? They're not playing NFL teams every week, but they're expected, especially in the college football playoffs, to be developed. Anthony Richardson came from Florida. He played 1 season in Florida, then comes here with a brand new head coach, obviously spends the entire first season on the injured list. This is not, I don't think there's enough here to just throw in the towel. The Panthers announced today that they have thrown in the towel on Bryce Young. Will Levis has made some crucial, terrible, his own coach is saying you're a grown man, you've thrown the game twice. Those are real things from other NFL quarterbacks. So when you're looking in the grand scheme of things of where the Colts are at with Anthony Richardson, it's nowhere near time to throw in the towel. There's so much more here that I think needs to be polished. The game plan needs to be figured out. Jim Bob Cooter is also still trying to figure out, and Shane Steichen as well, also trying to figure out what is the skill set. Who are the guys we got? Adonai Mitchell's new, but Michael Pittman is one of the only few staples. Obviously, we don't have a tight end room. All of the tight ends have played truly abysmal. I think they have a combined 3 total targets this year. So there's so many things to figure out before we just start panicking. No one expected the Colts to go to the Super Bowl this year. Now, I still project them as being a potentially 9 or 10 or 11 win team. if they're able to figure it out. But that's the big if, right? And they were able to figure out in the second half of this game against the Packers of being able to only allow 34 rushing yards as opposed to the 235. So adjustments are being made based on the personnel that they have. Now, obviously, I think there's so much blame to be put on Chris Ballard and company on this, but I do think there's so much more to look forward to than to look down on with this Indianapolis Colts team.